Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and today I want to talk about how I don't have a problem with the voice acting in the new Super Mario Bros. Movie. We finally got the first teaser trailer for this Mario movie by Illumination and Nintendo. It's been in works for so many years, all the speculation and hoping and waiting, it's finally coming to a close. We're finally in the final stretch for this movie, we're finally seeing it get marketed, and it looks like Nintendo is doing an absolute incredible job here. I think for the most part, everyone seems to be in agreement that this is looking like a pretty good movie. The reception has been pretty positive. But the most contentious point we have seen though, isn't even necessarily with the voice acting overall, but specifically with Chris Pratt's portrayal of Mario in this movie. There's been a lot of talk on how the French versions and the Brazilian versions sound better, because the direction of Mario in those movies is more of an Italian take, something more reminiscent of what Charles Martinet, the main voice actor for Mario in all the different Mario games, portrays. And there's been even some discussion that it's been unfair that Nintendo has casted Chris Pratt as Mario as opposed to Charles Martinet, the person who's been acting as Mario for so many years. So that's what I want to talk about today, ultimately how I'm personally okay with what's going on here, and I think Nintendo's actually headed in a pretty good direction. But before we jump into things, let me first very quickly mention my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It's linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe or perhaps consider joining as a member. So the main focus of this discussion has to do with Chris Pratt and his performance as Mario, but I do want to talk about the other roles we've seen so far. The roles of Kamek, the roles of the Penguin King, the roles of Toad, they're all done brilliantly well. These different side characters, each one, I think is done expertly. They fit pretty close to the archetype we would have expected for those particular characters and their roles, and they just fit. They're funny to see. When we see the Penguin King speaking in that kingly way, and he's asking if Bowser yields, that's just wonderful. Yes, it's a funny moment, but it's delivered expertly well. The voice itself isn't funny. It's actually a very epic, grandiose voice, but put under the circumstance that it is, it comes off as funny. And that's exactly how it should be, and it works perfectly. With Kamek, it truly does feel like this is the right-hand man or subject of Bowser that supports and presents him, and it just fits. With Toad, well, Toad appears to be, this Toad in particular, looks like it's going to be traveling alongside Mario for a big part of the movie, but from what we understand of the Toads, they have like that raspy, sort of pseudo high-pitched voice at the same time. What we're getting here from Keegan-Michael Key is definitely fitting of that idea. Is it a little bit different? Yes, but that's a big point I want to actually talk about here. When it comes to these different characters, we may have had an idea of how they would sound, but throughout playing the different Mario games over the years, we're going to be seeing them done that will obviously differ somewhat from how we envisioned for most of us, but for most of these side characters, they're fitting pretty darn well, including Toad. Now, for Bowser, the most significant role here beyond Mario, Jack Black is doing great. I have no problems with this casting. I think it's probably the best possible casting we could have envisioned in terms of all known famous people. It was a great casting. And when I see Bowser talk for the first time, when he says to open the gates, it sounds really strong and powerful, which is fitting of what Bowser should be. So I think he does great there. But when we continue to hear Bowser and how he says he does not yield, and it's almost like a comical, mischievous look. Like it's a different take on Bowser that we don't normally get to see, but I love it. It's definitely something antagonistic, but it's also lighthearted at the same time, which is fitting because this is a Mario movie, right? It's intended for all ages. And it opens the door for flexibility for how Bowser can interact down the line. But ultimately still, we're seeing a strong and powerful Koopa King. Like, that is still being presented well here, but there's a bit of insanity to him, which is very fun, very interesting. I think Jack Black is doing a great job of that. But again, this isn't maybe exactly as some people may have envisioned Bowser, so there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period here. But that's how it is whenever it comes to anything that's new. When it's something that's new that we're not used to, that we haven't come to expect, there's going to be an adjustment period. And that brings me to Chris Pratt's performance of Mario. I don't have a problem with it. Do I think it fits as perfectly well as Jack Black's performance with Bowser? I think most people will disagree with that idea. I'm on the fence, because I feel they don't have to hold to a specific idea for what Mario needs to be. This kind of goes back to how I mentioned in the introduction, how there is a bit of discourse on whether Charles Martinet should have been playing Mario here. Charles Martinet presents Mario in the games as more of an Italian plumber, and he has a bit of that sort of style of voice. So when we take a look at Mario here, it's clearly just like an American kind of voice. It's Chris Pratt, basically. And it seems like people have a problem with that. I don't, because this is another version of Mario. There's always going to be different depictions of Mario, and when we pay attention to the movie, this is Mario's introduction to the Mushroom Kingdom. He's coming from elsewhere. Where is he coming from? Is he coming from Italy? Or is he coming from perhaps something like Brooklyn or Manhattan or New Donk City, which is a very American New York world? We don't have the full context here. We don't know where he's coming from. So it may even be the case that once the movie comes out and we see the different versions of this movie, some people are going to say, oh, obviously the Italian versions or the Italian sounding versions, like from the Brazil localization or the French localization, are better because Mario sounds more like what they would have expected because of Charles Martinet. But if he's coming from New York and he's been living in New York as an American for years, is that really the best depiction of Mario? Under those circumstances, I'm going to say no. If Mario's a young guy in his 20s who's been living in New York, who lives a fairly American life, but obviously under the guise of the Mario world, so not exactly New York, but something like it, I would think he probably would sound more American. And on that note, there has been some discussion if whether Mario's voice has a bit of a Brooklyn accent. I can't say for certain, but there is something about that last line we put in there for the teaser. There's something there. There's a little bit of something there, and it's subtle. And I think that might work really well. Ultimately, what I think right now is that we just don't have enough time with Mario to really fully come into comfort with how he speaks and what he does. It's not just with how it sounds, but also context, as I discussed before. Is he coming from Italy? Is he coming from New York? That matters in terms of what his accent should sound like, right? I feel like that's a pretty logical perspective here. And after having watched the trailer several times already, the more and more I watch it, the more and more natural the voice does sound to me. Think about it. Who does Chris Pratt tend to play in the different movies he stars in? Like, for example, in Guardians of the Galaxy, he plays the main character or protagonist that will get the job done, is heroic, but is also lighthearted and comical. And considering the perspective of this movie, there's gonna be a degree of lightheartedness and comic all throughout. Look at the cast. We got Seth Rogen and Jack Black. Look at how Jack Black is portraying Bowser so far. He is strong and powerful, but he also has the flexibility to be mischievous and morose, to fit into this comical, fun fantasy world. So someone like Chris Pratt could do a great job of an American version of Mario. But then with the other conversation point of Charles Martinet not getting to have this role, again, we don't know what exactly is the direction the producers and directors want for Mario this time around. Keep in mind, Nintendo's closely at work here. Shigeru Miyamoto's closely working on this project. They made that decision to not have Charles Martinet play as Mario. So for the vision that they have for this movie, they pick someone else who has a very different voice. So it's clearly a different direction that they have in mind. But some people feel like it's unfair because they feel like Charles Martinet would deserve this role because of all the work he's done for Mario over the years. And now that we're getting the biggest voice acted role ever for Mario, it just seems like a tremendous injustice. Well, Charles Martinet is still in the movie. Have you seen him in the credits? He's in the credits. He has a role. What is that role exactly? Well, we won't know until later on. But I bring up that point to say that I don't think this is an injustice for him. He still has a job here. He's still going to get to play as Mario in the main games. He's still being celebrated and represented in this movie. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be different depictions of different characters, especially as you continue throughout time and have different versions of it. It's not always going to be the same person. Charles Martinet has been doing Mario for years. At some point or another, we do have to move forward here. Now, it's not to say Chris Pratt's going to now become the main voice for Mario in all the different Mario games. That just seems really unlikely considering the price tag here. But for the Mario movies, it does make sense to go with someone else, especially when you think about the kind of voices Mario does and what they may want for Mario to do in this movie in terms of having more normal conversations and interactions. This is probably the right way to go. So ultimately, I don't have a problem with Mario's voice so far. Am I 100% comfortable with the voice already? No, not 100%, but it isn't straight up blatantly bad, and after watching it several times, if I didn't already have an idea of how Mario should sound, I would say it feels and looks natural. So with more context and more scenes and more time, I do think I will become comfortable with this voice for Mario, and I might even say it's good, but we won't know until we see the movie, or at least more of the movie. But before I close things out, I want to briefly mention one other character we saw, and that's Luigi at the very end, who's being played by Charlie Day. Charlie Day, I think, is the perfect casting for Luigi, the kind of character that it's very comical and fun that can freak out, which is what Luigi does, but still like an important character, like a Robin kind of character. I think the fit is strong, and even though we don't hear too much of his voice here, the little screams as he's being chased by the dry bones into the castle, it fits. It's exactly what I would sort of expect from Charlie Day and Luigi. Like, this is what I wouldn't want it from Luigi, so I think it's a really good casting. I think the castings for all these different characters has been done really well. I think it's all really strong, and I am extremely optimistic for the acting in this movie, but we won't know for sure until we get to see the entire movie how we're actually going to feel fully about it. But again, I think it's really, really promising. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.